Hello there, good evening, and welcome to this live discussion. Elections were held in Guyana on the 2nd of March. That's more than a week ago. That's last month, actually. And the nation is still awaiting the results of those elections. Between then and now, we have had quite a number of developments, including attempts by the coalition to declare or to use GCOM to declare results that are not really reflective of the will of the people of this country. And we have been hearing stories about where fraudulent statements of poll came from and so forth. I have with me in studio this evening to discuss what has been happening. Bishop Juan Edghill, former junior minister as well as member of parliament, and both Madam Gail Teixeira and Priya Manickchand, also former members of parliament, and both serve as ministers in previous PPPC administration. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Eddie.
And good evening to all of our viewers.
I want to start first and foremost to give each and every one of you an opportunity, some opening remarks with regards to what happened on the 2nd of March and the days after the 2nd of March. I'm going to start with you, Bishop.
Well, Eddie and viewers, Guyanese anticipated free and fair elections. Polling on the 2nd of March went smoothly. At the close of poll, political parties, through their representatives, witnessed the count at each polling station. At that time, legal documents called a statement of poll was made up by the presiding officer of the number of votes that were cast to each political party. And all the persons present at the time of that count signed on to those documents. Each political party got a copy, and the originals went to the returning officer and the chief elections officer. In 9 regions, those statements of polls were used to verify the results, and there is no dispute. In Region 4, those statements of poll have not been used for all 879 boxes. The process was aborted midway. A spreadsheet was used and a purported declaration with fictitious numbers were made. All that Guyanese are waiting on is compliance with Section 84 of the Representation of the People's Act to ensure that the numbers that are tabulated at the GCOM's Region 4 returning officers are numbers that could be verified as the numbers that were given in each box as signed onto by the various observers and agents who were present at that time. And that's where we are as a country, just getting 879 numbers added and making sure that those 879 numbers are numbers that were accurately reflected from the statements of poll.
So I just want to back up a little bit because I think it's important that we understand what statements of poll are. You remember Guyana had a history of rigged elections. Not coincidentally, the same people who are in government now understand and have a practice, and it's part of their DNA to rig elections. And after 28 years of rigging elections, the world said, and particularly Guyanese, with the assistance of President James Carter, and the Carter Center, said we were no longer going to have rigged elections in Guyana. We would see what the people wanted, and that their will would be reflected and their voices would be heard through their ballots. And so one of the measures introduced to make sure elections weren't rigged was that we would count the ballots at the place of poll. Because what happened before, when they used to rig the elections, people would go religiously and they would vote, and they would mark their X next to the cup, and they would mark their X next to the bell, and they would vote for different parties outside the PNC. But then at the end of that process, they would pick up a ballot box, take it to GDF, and different things would go into the box because nobody saw what happened with it. We have things like ballot box martyrs and so on, where people are trying to follow that box to make sure nothing was added to it and it wasn't tampered with and so on. That got ended in 1992, and we said all the parties agreed with the assistance and persuasion of President Carter that we would count the ballots at a place of poll. And a record would be made there. And that record is really what we're calling the statement of poll. It means the presiding officer, in the presence of everybody in the polling place, including the representatives of the parties and observers who are present, calls out each ballot, one for the PNC, one for the PPP, one for the APNU, one for the ANUG, one for the LJP. And as they call people, they mark it down, and at the end of it all, a tally is done. And the presiding officer writes on the statement of poll, so many people were registered to vote in this polling place, so many people turned up to vote, so many voted for party A, for party B, for party C, this is how many spoiled votes we got, this is how many rejected ballots we got. And when she's done, everybody there signs it, the presiding officer, the polling agents, and copies are given to different people by law. This is not, nobody's exercising discretion here. The presiding officer takes 2 copies to give to the returning officer. In this case would be Mr. Mingo, and to GCOM. She gives the polling agents from the political parties their copy, and here she's required to post one conspicuously in a conspicuous place. Most people post it outside the door where people would have walked in to do their voting. So that on the evening of the 2nd of March, all polling agents from different political parties left that building with statements of polls in their hands. They left and they took it to their party headquarters or command centers. Many of them sent through pictures. By 11 o'clock, and the presiding officers took those statements to GCOM's offices, wherever the returning officer was. In Region 3, it was at Crane. In Region 4, it was at Ashman's building, which is a whole problem by itself. But it was taken there. So GCOM had these statements by 10 o'clock that night, because you're talking about Region 4. You would have had all of Georgetown by 10, 11 o'clock. In fact, Mr. Mingo, Claremont Mingo, the returning officer of Region 4, began the count at 11:30. Began the tabulation in the Ashman building at 11:30 that night. When he began that tabulation, checking to see, and what is to begin the tabulation, what is to do the tabulation, Mr. Mingo holds up the statement, the poll his presiding officer brought, and he says, this is what my own says. So much the PPP got, so much the APNU got, so much the ANUG got, and you sit down, the parties sit down and check to make sure that's what their polls say. That process started at 11:30, and let me just say the PPPC was ready to start and continue that process until it was finished. So it was the same statements of poll that we left the building with, that we were ready to begin the tabulation with. It's the same statements of poll that the GCOM people had. It would reflect the same thing that's posted outside in the conspicuous place outside each polling place. And we were ready to go straight through till it was finished. And if it had continued by 9 that morning, all would have been, by 9 a.m. on Tuesday, it all would have been finished. That is to say that we were prepared that night to use the statements of poll that we had in our possession, that we got from the polling places, to begin and continue and complete that tabulation. I do see, and the reason I outlined that process for you, Eddie, is I see the mouthpieces of the APNU and so on starting up this thing that the PPP statements might be false. I'm saying we were ready that night. How are we going to falsify anything? We were ready that night to begin and end. The only party who was not ready to begin and end was the APNU. They began, they did some, and then we'll talk about those just now, all the different stops, who's sick, who had to go to the hospital, who had a heart attack, who belly hurting, who could barely call a word because they're so quiet. Pause the process all along, trying to get us out of that building. Bomb scare, police officers, shouting, trying to lock the door, all those things, keeping the press out, trying to get us out of the building to get to those in my view, to leave the statements of poll. So the point I'm making is the same statements we left the polling place with are the same statements that we were prepared to begin and end that thing with right then in that one night.
Madam Teixeira, I'm going to give you a minute as well to just your opening statements before we get into the other issues we want to examine tonight.
Well, I'm glad my colleagues before have spoken about what happened and transpired, but I think that this is all deja vu. It's all deja vu. We've seen this before. The difference is, in this case, and I think everyone went to the poll with a lot of optimism, and the system, with some hiccups, ran relatively well and peacefully. But we began to realize that the numbers for APNU were not adding up, even in their own areas, in the areas that they depended on, Region 4, Region 7, Region 10. And so what we saw was a plot unfold. In the 70s and 80s, there was ballot boxes being taken by the army. In the beginning, there was stuffing of the ballot boxes. So 68 and 73 is about people stuffing ballot boxes with rubber bands and ballots being carried, boxes being carried by the GDF and being used and then being counted, and agents being locked out, etc. Then you have the 80s version of Hoyt and so on, where the boxes are not tampered with at the station, they're tampered when they get into certain places. And then you have this occasion now, which is blatant activities to rig the whole thing in front of the entire world. Cameras rolling, party representatives. There are more party representatives at these elections than any other time in our country. And so whether they were new, whether they're just learning, they were present, civil society, observers. We haven't had such a delegation of observers, international observers and local observers, I think, even in comparison to 92, in terms of their spread and their ability to be able to monitor us every step of the way. And all of this was taking place, what Priya described, what Bishop described, as taking while the cameras are rolling throughout. And this was so blatant, and clearly APNU felt they would have gotten away with it. GCOM felt they would go away with it, because in all of this we can't say that GCOM is not, doesn't play a role.
Before you go on, operator, we're getting reports that the audio is not going on. Persons are not hearing us clearly. If you can just check that. I'm seeing several messages coming in to say that the audio is not quite clear. Just give us an indication when it's up and running better. Should we go ahead?
I'm not sure they heard you.
Yeah, because a number of persons are messaging to say that they're not getting the audio. Operator, just let us know when the audio is fixed quickly so that we can continue. Okay, good. So we understand the audio. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what is a distinct thing about these elections is that, first of all, we're an information-based world with rapid communication, so that in the 70s and 80s, it took weeks for all this to come out. This is now, within seconds, people in the world are seeing what's going on, and in Guyana. The second thing is the rather rapid response of the international community. We have not seen this even in the 70s, 80s, in 92. And again, this has to do, I think, with layers and layers of communication, networking. The world is a slightly different place than probably the 80s and 70s and 80s. And the fact, of course, probably that we have greater strategic importance now vis-a-vis oil and other political strategic interests. And so the fact that we have seen the statements as of tonight, the British Foreign Secretary, the UK Foreign Secretary coming forward, the US Bipartisan Committee, the Twitters and so on by Secretary Pompey with the Deputy Canadian Prime Minister. We are seeing every day the response to the International Community, and this is important for our people to know. We are not alone in all of this. We're not alone in Guyana in terms of the opinions for democracy, the fight for democracy, the willingness. Not this time. This time, no. The will of the people must be heard. The will of all people must be heard. And the second thing is that the international community is saying, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to tolerate a transition by a government that has not been in compliance with the laws of our country, with your country. They're not going to accept this. So I think that's a major distinction. Also, what has been interesting for me is the number of young people who've said to me, you know, when you older people talk about the 70s and 80s, we feel that's all gone. you all are talking old hat, and that the younger generations, my God, this has happened again. We're seeing it now in front of our eyes, played in front of our eyes, with videos, with pictures, with audio, everything. So I think these are major distinctions, and that has really led to an overpowering opinion, view, movement of people who are saying, no, this is not about APNU, this is not about PVP, this is about defending democracy in our country. This is what our duty is as Guyanese. This is now a civic duty, a patriotic duty to do these things. And to me, that's one of the distinctions between 70s and the 80s and now. And when we go on in the program, how the APNU is trying to create an alternative narrative to this in the face of this overwhelming outpouring, both internationally and locally, in relation to what's happened.
All right, so before I come to you, Priya, what I wanted to put this into context, because we have an audio to play, and I think that's the exact line you were trying to get.
Before you go to the audio, I just wanted to well, first of all, to say I'm really, really sorry that Gail and people like Gail have to go through this. And I would have been very happy. Yes, I would have been very happy never to have lived this kind of thing. I'm still wrapping my head around what this means and how hurt this country has become by this, the selfish action of a few. But Eddie, I just wanted to point out that Gail spoke about us not being alone. Let me just say that this is not the PPP versus Granger. This is not the PPP plus ANOG plus LJP versus Granger. This is literally the entire world speaking about it. Let's look at who has made statements. The United Nations, it has 195 countries. The CARICOM, which has 15 countries. The Commonwealth, 54 countries. The European Union, 23 countries. The OAS, 20 something countries. The United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Norway, France, Barbados. I think I saw today something earlier this evening, Prime Minister Gaston from Antigua and Barbuda. And every single local organization here that observed, the Bar Association, AmCham, the Private Sector Commission, all the various organizations, and what have they been saying? So this is the whole world. I don't think there's a country in this world who hasn't spoken directly, or they haven't spoken through their representative bodies. And let me just give you, this is one of the things, this is the latest statement from Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab from the United Kingdom, and this is what he says. The United Kingdom expresses deep concern about the events following the elections in Guyana on the 2nd of March 2020. We call upon the President to preserve the principle of free, fair and credible elections. Allegations of electoral fraud and premature declarations of victory prior to the completion of a credible process pose a grave threat to the democratic principles of Guyana. Eddie, I don't know how much stronger people can be. There have been other countries, including the US, Canada, and the UK, who have said, we specifically call on Granger not to be sworn in. Yeah. So around the countries have been couched in different language, but several things have come out. That one, the process is completely flawed. If this process continues without giving effect to the will of the people, it is going to amount to electoral fraud. And essentially the president, any government sworn in those conditions with results that reflect that fraud will be unconstitutional, illegitimate. It's not Priya's words, this is the world's words. Illegitimate, unrecognized, and as the gentleman said, a grave risk to democracy in the world.
Right.
All right, so you touched on a couple of those organizations, and I think the point that you also made is that these statements and comments are coming from the very, very highest levels of government in these countries, and you have a number of former heads of state and heads of government who have also commented. And we will share some more of the comments and statements that came out. We want to share this one, which is a bit closer to home. Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, who happens to be the current chair of CARICOM. She did a statement as well, and I think we have an audio here that we're going to play for you. When we come back, we're going to continue the discussions.
The committee calls on the electoral officials in Guyana and the representative political parties to work together to achieve a peaceful and lawful completion of the electoral process by ensuring the tabulation of the results in all regions using the statement of polls in a transparent manner in the presence of the representatives of the political parties and the electoral observers. Indeed, CARICOM issued a statement on Thursday night to this effect, and one was also issued yesterday from the chief of the independent CARICOM electoral observation team. Both statements called on GCOM to complete this process. We are very clear that every vote must be made to count, and transparently so. We have noted that all sides have been making serious allegations against each other. It is critical that good sense prevail. The preservation of law and order is paramount, and all parties must work hard to ensure that there is peace on the roads in Guyana and peace in the communities across Guyana. We have been instructed that there has already been one death reported overnight. That is one death too many. In simple language, we ask the parties to recognize that the primary consideration must be not only who will be president, but more so who will be alive come next week or next month. For there cannot be a tolerance for any further loss of life. I have this morning yet again spoken to both the President and the Leader of the Opposition and indicated that CARICOM stands ready to be able to be there to facilitate further dialogue and any actions that are necessary. We have done this on many occasions in the past, including in Guyana, when elections have been highly contentious and when social order and the rule of law has been threatened across the region. We are family, and this is what happens when there are disputes in families. We will work together to create the space for dialogue and resolution once there is an acceptance on the part of all parties that there is a higher interest beyond simply the result in this election.
So there you had the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, talking about the situation in Guyana. And one of the fundamental points that she made, I know, Priya, you want to focus on this, is that every vote must be made to count. That statement is echoed in a number of the other statements that came out from leaders, world leaders generally, and also the statement about the point that has been made is that of credible allegations of voter fraud.
Well, not voter fraud, credible allegations that with each vote not being counted, it will amount to electoral fraud. So let me say, and we have to remember the history of this week. I believe we're talking about a history of a week, but it really is what we're talking about. When some of these first statements came out, like on Thursday afternoon and early Friday morning, at that time, we still knew where the statements of poll were, and we were prepared to resume. In fact, we were begging to resume the tabulation using those statements of poll. Remember what happened on Friday afternoon? Friday morning, everybody was physically evicted from the building with police. That is after the Thursday bomb threat and so on didn't work to move people. People were physically removed. There are videos of it with police in riot gear. You hear people who are recording the video saying, don't resist, just let's move. Because they came in there to physically, their instructions were to physically move people. From Friday to now, we don't know where those statements are. And we believe strongly with the narratives and language coming out of the AP and UAFC and their mouthpieces. I have every reason to believe that the integrity of the statements and information contained therein might not have been preserved. And
not forgetting that there was an attempt to get blank statements of poll, which our election agent, Mr. Zulfikar Mustafa, an attorney at law, and the Nandalal had to address. And because they did not get access to blank statements of poll, even the recount that they requested for Region 5 and 6 was eventually aborted because it was just a smoke screen to get their hands on blank statements of poll that were not used in the electoral process. So there are lots of questions arising.
Right. So to explain that, we believe that the only way we can give effect to Prime Minister Motley's, and she's presently the chairperson of CARICOM, call that or demand, I should say, that every vote must count, is to get into the boxes. Yeah. You have to go into those ballot boxes to determine what it is people wanted. In my view, in my considered view, that is how we will determine what people wanted through their ballot. And whatever it is they wanted and whatever is reflected there, all the parties have to live with it. And anybody who loves Guyana, anybody who says they want to bring this to an end, anyone who says they're peace-loving people and would like to engage in sensible dialogue on perhaps the way forward in all the elections and so on, would not resist opening those boxes, because they can end it right there. In under 3 hours, all those votes can be counted. In under 3 hours, we can get a resolution to all of this.
And that's not a request that is a reasonable request. It is provided for in the law. If after verification with statements of poll, there are still disputes, a political party can request a recount. You have until noon of the following day, when the declaration is made, to request that recount. So if when the verification of the remaining 458 boxes that is still to be verified, there are numbers that are variance with each other, you don't have to break up GCOM and burn down the place. You just go ahead. But before you get a final declaration, the law provides for a political party to request a recount. You can request a recount for the boxes on the dispute, or you could request a recount for the entire region. And that recount, like Priya is saying, is not something you're giving way to. It's what the law provides for. You sit down and you recount the votes, you look at the statements of poll for that particular box, and if everything is okay, you take it off. If it is not correct, all the parties witnessing the recount make the adjustments, and you initially say, what is your new number? And the matter is resolved.
But I want to bring you back to the statements, because one of the things I think you hear coming out from a lot of sober-minded and right-minded people are statements like the PPP, the other parties that contested the elections, the international community, the observers, and they all recognize that there has to be some reason, or there is something wrong with the fact that the process of verification was aborted. Save and except the APNU, AFC, and a few what I would want to call apologists like the Mosleys and so on, trying to give the impression there is an issue with the statements of poll from the PPP. And I know Mr. Shiro wanted to share some more of those statements that came out from the various international bodies and countries around the world. So I'm going to give you a chance to do that before we deal with the whole issue of this concocted story about fake statements of poll while refusing to show yours.
Well, I mean, I think we've dealt with some of them. I think the point that must be emphasized, because we could read several ones, and those have been in the press, and there's the U.S. State Assistant Secretary of the State who made these statements, and I had them on my phone, and they've just gone blank. But the thing is that the point must be made that at no time in Guyana's history, it's particularly electoral history, have we seen such an overwhelming immediate response to what has happened. And therefore, in the eyes of those who are present in the room, that this was bad enough. In other words, these were the diplomats, the international observers, our people. Mr. Kozak, Assistant Secretary, says, vote tabulation irregularities marred Guyana's March 2nd elections. Our ambassador and many observers saw flawed vote tabulation. Irrespective of today's legal proceedings, any government sworn in on the basis of that result would not be legitimate. The people of Guyana deserve a credible election and transfer of power that reflects their will. So, I mean, this is extremely powerful position taken by this gentleman who is the Assistant Secretary of State. We have never had this in Guyana, even in the worst periods of rigging up to before 1985, we were alone. President Carter means a lot in Guyana because he was one of the few who stood by our side, and some of the British parliamentarians. But we were alone. This is completely different. And I think therefore what we're saying is that we're vindicated as a people, as the People's Progressive Party Civic. We're vindicated in the stand we're taking that there one has been electoral fraud. And the point that must be made, this is not the electoral fraud of previous times. This is where GCOM itself, GCOM machinery itself, has been totally compromised, if not totally controlled by APNU, which many of us believe, and has blatantly rigged the elections or has committed electoral fraud. So it's a completely different situation that we're dealing with, and that's why the recourse to the court had to be used in order to try to stop what was the galloping of the Lowenfield and Mingo, and I don't know, the silence of Madam Justice Singh became more and more worrying in all of this. Today she said something, but really it is something where the top leaders of the GCOM are now involved in this electoral fraud and this denial of the right of Guyanese people to be able to have their vote count, which is what Prime Minister Mayor Motley is calling for, what we're calling for. The point that Priya was making is that based on the time that has elapsed and what has happened, we have to go back to the ballot box to open those ballot boxes and to count. Why is it that APNU says they won, but they don't want to put up their poll statements? Why is it that APNU is going around tonight and yesterday to different polling stations and taking down the official statements of poll that are posted on the schools, private residence? Why would you do that if you won? Why would you want to do that? If it isn't that you have a sinister motive, a sinister plan to change all of this, to try to manipulate and change what everybody is seeing up on the walls of the schools and the buildings. So I think that we now have to now brace ourselves. There's a ruling coming tomorrow that we have to be able, as a people, to be able to say we're not going to tolerate this. And the machinations of the Moses Nagamutus and the Amna Alis and the Muslis, etc., and the Cathy Hughes must be seen as a lonely cabal. They're lonely. That's all they are. They're standing on quicksand, and they're trying to fool the people of our country, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's
No, go ahead.
you know, when everybody can't be wrong, and only the APNU and their PR people are right. Can't be that. I mean, let's apply sense here. It cannot be that the entire world, all those countries I spoke of just now, they're all wrong about APNU. They all prefer the PPP. They have all been bought by Jack Dale. You know, those are the kinds of silliness you're hearing. And only the APNU is accurate. Only the APNU is right about this. It cannot be that. So it must mean then that something is very wrong. Now, Gail raised, and let me tell you this is the representative in New York, Eric Ulrich, and he says, I'm deeply troubled by reports of fraud in the Guyana elections, and I stand in strong solidarity with my West Indian friends and constituents during this time of uncertainty. We must never allow corruption to prevail over democracy. People outside of Guyana, far and wide, in countries across this world, recognize that what happened that day was corrupt. It is going to be something that derails democracy, and it would not be good for any democratic people or any country in the world. It cannot be that only the APNU, AFC, and their leaders, and I have to tell you, even their supporters, look at what's happening on Facebook. Yes, you have the faithful supporter who will believe everything that is put out there, but you have people who are saying openly, I voted for you, but I cannot tolerate stealing people's votes. I want my vote counted again in 5 years. and I hoped we could work to get you back into office in that time. People are not prepared with this kind of information and intelligence and so on in this era to do this. I shouldn't say people, I should say most reasonable people. And so it's not the loudest voices are speaking on behalf of the APNU, and they might even be drowning out supporters who are looking on quietly but do not agree with this. And so, Eddie, it is important that we understand that this is not a struggle of political party to political party. It's the world against the David Granger administration, saying specifically, I mean, they didn't couch it in, diplomats are usually very, very careful and their language is so fluffy, flowery and so on. They say very nice things that, we wouldn't recognize a government, or they'd say like it would go against the grain of some. They didn't say that. They said Mr. Granger must avoid being sworn in on these results. They said a government that a person sworn in on these results in this manner would be considered illegitimate. As a government that's not legitimate, that's serious stuff.
Bishop.
The important thing to add to what my colleagues have been saying for the Guyanese public that is viewing this program, the process of posting a statement of poll on the polling place where you voted, it's one of the most powerful safeguards. The PPPC, when they took the risk of putting out the statements of poll on that website, which the world has been able to view, took the risk of public scrutiny from every John public to see if we were posting fraudulent statements of poll. I've had people who called me and said, Bishop, I took a photograph and my numbers and your numbers are correct. They cannot say that about the APNU AFC statements of poll because they haven't made it public. They cannot say that about GCOM's numbers because they have not made that public as well. So the issue of anybody, whether it's GCOM, Roxanne Myers, or Lowenfield, or Mingo, or the girl we hear about in court today who did the tabulation, anybody who would like to switch those numbers, you'll have to convince the thousands of Guyanese who went back in the morning to see how the voting went in their polling district and read those statements of poll, took pictures, and has compared it to what the PPPC has published. So the numbers that we are talking about, they came from a base. In mathematics, you got to show the working. We have the working. But up until now, GCOM, neither the AP and UFC have not shown the working. So that's one thing I want to establish. The second thing that is very clear, from all the pronouncements and arguments that are being made, the rigging plan of Granger and his cabal and his cohorts and surrogates in GCOM was to declare falsified results, be sworn in, and the aggrieved PPPC must challenge it by way of an elections petition, which will never be heard, like what happened with the 2015 elections petition. The same people who are praying to tell Granger that God is with them must know that God is really at work, because God came through in the nick of time and ensured that the correct intervention was made and that rigging plan did not go through. And that is where the crux of the matter is now. You have to prove your numbers through verification. And I don't believe any lawyer would want to take the case. That is why Mr. Boston behaved the way he behaved today. He had a basket to fetch water. He knew he had no ground to stand on.
Let's not discuss the
case because there'll be sub judice. But the issue here is a clear one. They intended, even Enrico Wilford, and I am amazed that Enrico Wilford, as the chairman of a board and acting CEO of NCN, would bring himself down to the level of a journalist to be asking questions to push a particular narrative. Why not wait and come by way of an election petition? And this seems to be the mantra that was going on. They knew fully well we could go ahead with falsified declaration. And the only redress you will have once a declaration is made and the president is sworn in is an election petition. So you will have an illegal, unconstitutional, dictatorial government installed upon a people, democracy through the window, and you fighting in the courts for 5 years and you never get it. We were able to stop that. And I believe this is a good sign for Guyana. Thanks that we had the capacity in terms of our personnel, the leadership of the party, the people who were there, our lawyers, we were able to stop this just in time. The non-compliance with Section 8-4 of the Representation of the People's Act was dealt with in the correct way. So where we are now, you had a coalition government who said they won the elections. You had a Mr. Mingo who said he made a declaration, but he haven't said where those numbers that he got to give APNU, those votes that he got, came from. And we have a situation where we now have to go back to the drawing book. And the only way all Guyanese will be satisfied, and the position must be simple. Let me open the ballot boxes. Take the 3 hours that Priya Manickchand spoke about. Everybody assemble their agents, put up back the statements of poll, count and see if it matches with the statement of poll. If there are any adjustments, make the adjustments, we do the tabulation, and the declaration is made. This could be done before Friday. This could be done before Friday. Everybody could know the winner, a declaration is made, and we have a new president. Why the resistance? Why the resistance? You see, everybody was afraid about rigged elections. So the PPPC was able to put in every polling place across this country able, well-trained, well-equipped polling agents. So the stuffing couldn't take place because of the absence of scrutineers or polling agents from the PPPC. So that rigging plan had to move into the machinery at GCOM. Where are we talking about? Criminal actions. This is criminal action. This is fraud. This is fraud we're talking about here. And I don't understand that you still have people who's supposed to be decent, God-fearing, analytical, intelligent, wise, reasonable, the conscience of the nation, all those kinds of types who describe themselves opinion makers, who choose to be silent. While you have statements coming from international organizations and local organizations. But I believe right now, as a country, everybody's sitting up and taking notice. A wrong was done and must be corrected. And the way for it to be corrected, verification of statement of polls and a recount of the boxes. Everybody will be satisfied. No blood needs to be shed. No policeman needs to be injured. No fires need to be lit. Everybody could be at calm. Let process be followed. And that's all we're saying. Let process be followed.
I think we're almost out of time. So
yeah, I also want to quickly, Bishop spoke of the leadership of the PPP and the efforts by the PPP, but I think it would be remiss if we didn't recognize that everybody stood. I saw every single new party standing that night, and sometimes those new parties were made up of 5 people in the executive. They don't have a lot of resources, they don't have a lot of people,
they stood up.
But they came and they stayed and they waited, and people took turns in watching those statements of poll. I mean, this is ridiculous, but literally putting chairs and desks and staring at them, and all the small parties stood also. I also watched civic-minded people who might have voted for a party here and a party there, whatever it is, that is their right, who were observing the elections, that also stood up for democracy. And so I believe the leadership of the APNU AFC is in this alone. I don't think there's I would even go so far as to differ with my senior Mr. Edghill to say that I don't believe the people who are silent are necessarily in agreement with what they're doing. It's just some people take a little bit longer to speak and so on. But I have grave difficulty believing that the decent supporters of the APNU, and I believe there are many, I actually believe the supporters of the APNU AFC are in the majority decent people, that they support what is going on. And I urge them that, you know, the famous quote, all it takes for evil to take hold is for good people to stay quiet. And I think it's important now in your spaces, wherever they are, in your churches, in your temples, in your mosques, on your Facebook page, in your homes, to understand that the wrong was done here. And we are not saying that the PPP must be sworn in. So here is what we're saying. We are saying let's open those boxes. Whatever is the result in the boxes, we'll live with it. Whoever wins from the count of the votes in those boxes will reflect what the people of this country wanted.
Once the integrity of the boxes can be ascertained.
Yes. Why do people go to an election? People go to an election so that they could speak through their ballot. It is not about political parties. It's not about empowering the PPP or the PNC or giving power to the APNU and the AFC. It is about empowering people. And they use that power to choose a government they want. That is fundamentally what this is about. And if you don't give effect to what people said they wanted on the day and night of March 2nd, then you're essentially stealing from the people of this country their power. You're stealing from them their ability to speak. You're taking away their right to choose a government. So you're not harming a political party. It's the people who are being harmed here, the people who are being denied a right. And I think that is really the cry. I'd like us to see it not as a fight for political power by any political party, but that the people of Guyana, their power that they were transferring to whichever party they voted for in the majority, that would be given effect to. So the will of the people is what must prevail here, is what must succeed here. And in all of that, there will be a lot of noise, not by a lot of people, but a small number of people who are very loud, You know them. They're the friendly journalists, and I see some people questioning whether that's a word that can be used to describe some of them, but who are carrying the narrative of the APNU AFC. And some of it is so foolish it's not worthy of discussion, like there's a Russian here to rig the election. We have paper and pencil. And so unless he's coming with an eraser and a sharpener, we don't need anybody to manipulate a computer system. That's not how it's done. The GCOM and APNU showed you how it's done. They put people out of a room, they call the police, they call in a bomb scare, and then they confiscate statements of polls. That's how it's really done.
And I'm glad you raised that issue, because in all of this that has been happening, the issues at the GCOM Command Center, where the police would have closed off the place, the whole issue of concerns about the tabulation not being completed and whether or not statements of polls could have been adjusted or so while the place was cleared of party agents and observers and so on. Let's talk a little bit about, you raised the point about the alternative narrative that you're hearing coming from the APNU AFC with folks like Moses Nagamoto, Ali and so forth. I want to start with you.
Yeah, one of the things I think that my colleagues are talking about is that's what we're all focused on, and that is the critical issue. But at the same time, there are layers of other things going on that are dangerous to our democracy. the AFC is not prepared to give up power. That's clear. If they were, and they were being a democratic party, they would have let the whole thing go through, and by Thursday we would have known who the winner, and we would have had our government installed as of today. Obviously they don't want that, but in their loneliness, because they're totally alone and isolated and desperate, and so they're behaving very typically like the old PNC, but in a much more brazen way maybe than even Burnham would have done it, because some of the things they've done, even I'm not sure Burnham would have gone ahead with. But they're indicators that are dangerous to us. The whole view that we talked about before of the new surveillance equipment moving to a police state. So while you have this thing going on at the top, which is dealing with the court and trying to get the court to rule in a way that we can return back to finding the count and making sure every vote counts. At the same time, there are other things taking place that are indicative, as you said, the press being removed from the monitoring, the European Union being, international observers being threatened that their accreditation could be removed, the surveillance systems of persons who are being searched when they get back to their hotel, their passports taken, and then we have also this bizarre statement by Mr. Nagamutu talking about sedition and the 1953 movement. This is all a concoction of Mr. Nagamutu in his imagination to make himself relevant, because he's been silent for months now. He hasn't even featured as a speaker on the rallies. If I'm wrong, I haven't followed all the rallies. He's been silent, and they plucked him out of the box where they put him in, because he's of no use to them, until they need to pull him out like a puppet, wind him up, crank him up, and let him spew all this garbage about sedition and 1953 and racial comments about this plot by the PPP, etc. This is dangerous stuff. And you talked about that, there are people who are still believing in their party, and there will always be diehard people that stick with their party. But the statements that I made is that we have to remember that sedition was in our constitution, was in our laws, under Burnham, etc. They were removed by the PPP and government. We removed the areas of sedition from our legal statute, and it is under this government that it's been brought back under the Cybercrime Act. And the sedition laws are ones which are, first of all, there are any democratic country should not have in the 20th century, 21st century, sedition laws. This is totally contrary to the belief of democracy and so on. So they've reintroduced something that is so retrogressive. So we have to see the comments by Nagamutu as not the shouting from the rooftop of an irrelevant person, but a person who is a mouthpiece, who is being the mouthpiece of a government that is dead, it's finished, its time is over, and cannot give up its last breath. It must continue to churn out racial division and also fear amongst the people. And this is what Nagamutu represents in our country. It will go down in history as that. The comments by Amna Ali and Gordon Mosley are also churning out, attempting to create an alternative narrative to what, as Priya says, the rest of the world knows, the rest of the country knows. But this is to create their relevance and to try to, I think, whip up their supporters to believe that they have been wronged. They haven't been wronged. They have wronged the country. They haven't been wronged. APNU hasn't been wronged in AFC. They have wronged the entire nation of Guyanese, and they have to be stopped.
All right, so I think we have just about 3 minutes or so.
So I'll just be very quick. This is the
wrap
thing. If you say that your numbers are right and the PPP's numbers are wrong, and remember the PPP only put up a statement of poll that we got from the polling place. And until this afternoon, there were those statements of poll existed on hundreds of polling places across this country. There is footage, I think still images of, taken by citizens, by the way, not by the People's Progressive Party, where an employee, I believe, of Mrs. Lawrence, or one of the people in the executive of the
and also a city councillor,
was taking off the statements of poll from the various polling places. Now, first of all, I think that's an offense, and secondly, why would you do that? This is your chance for all of us to go and say, PPP, bring your statement poll, and we have ours, and let's go back to that place of poll and look at what was posted in the conspicuous place. So my question is, if, and this is what I'm asking people to do, apply your sense. Don't listen to anybody in all the noise. if it is someone Juan, and they really want to be sworn, then Mr. Granger said to his supporters on Thursday afternoon that by sunset tomorrow,
Sunrise.
you'll have a new president. Was it sunrise? Sunrise tomorrow, you'll have a new president. You want so badly to be sworn, and you want to stop and settle this country, and you want to end all this speculation about your credibility, not your credibility according to the PPP, your credibility according to the world. Well, put your numbers up. You say to us, well, here are my statements. Say that to us on Thursday and on Friday, and this is what they look like. You can scrutinize them, people of Guyana, people of the world, and you decide which one is right or wrong. Why don't you say that to us? Why don't you say to us, I said in my statement yesterday, I love Guyana, and I love to see Guyana settle down, and I want Guyanese to live in peace and harmony. Well, open the boxes. In 3 hours, we could settle all of this. We're not telling you, come meet me outside, we'll box it out. We're telling you, open some boxes.
Chico.
And let's open the boxes, let's count those votes. You see, the problem here, my friends, is not that you have party against party. I am saying, and I'm prepared to back it up, that the Guyana Elections Commission is complicit in this. I don't believe all officers are, but I believe enough are, to enough an extent, to say that the Guyana Elections Commission is executing a plan of the APNU AFC to rig this election. I don't believe GCOM woke up a day and said we'll rig the election by themselves, but I believe they're executing a plan. And if they're under threat, if they're under duress, they need to step up and say that. Until then, they cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted with anything that was in their possession that was not under scrutiny. And that, for me, is a problem.
Bishop, your closing words.
It is very instructive that a president who addressed the nation last night and put out a statement, nowhere in his statement did he include or even recognize the presence of the international community in observing these elections. He spoke about everything except that. He wanted to leave them out to keep exactly what Priya has been arguing. It's not a fight between the PPP and the APNU AFC. He is up against the world. What was taking place at GCOM was done under the watchful eyes of the world through their representatives. And the president, who is trying to tell people that the PPP put out fictitious numbers, didn't even remember to tell the Guyanese that the world was there watching when what he is talking about took place. So his choosing of ignoring the presence of the international observers and even the local observers is one way of burying his head in the sand and pretending that he is above the fray and everything is well. But the only person who will benefit from that skullduggery that was attempted to be foisted on the people is him. And he must take full responsibility for that, because the plot, he is at the apex of it. He's the beneficiary of it.
Bishop Juan, Edghill, Priya, Manickchand, Gail, Teixeira, I want to thank you guys very much for being here this evening. And of course, we want to thank our viewers for joining us. Of course, we're going to continue to keep you updated and to bring more information as this issue continues to develop. I presume over the next few days and following the ruling of the Chief Justice tomorrow, I think that will give the nation and give the political parties involved the direction that they are looking for. So until next time, we want to thank you very much for joining us. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.